average Conan Gray listening to experience. By the way, in case you're wondering, just lots of tears and crying and all that sadness. But to each their own. Queerness is that not of a monolith. Not one person, show, book, song, or any sort of media could encompass queerness and what it means to be queer. It changes drastically with the times and generations and political opinions, like a pendulum. Not to mention, queerness itself is not a monolith at all. It's a community, nonetheless. It encompasses more lived experience than most generalized groups or terms that we use to refer to a mass amount of individuals. It encompasses the concept of gender and sexuality on their separate and unique spectrums, while also talking about different overlapping lived experiences unique to that of queer identities. All this to say that the identity of that which is queer is filled with so much nuance and separation, and yet one of the stronger communities and concept itself. Not very often is something considered to be queer media, let alone an artist. We have very limited examples, consisting and not limited to people like Lady Gaga, Beyonce, Cher, Madonna, so on and so forth. Now, Chaperone even. And we often, though, tend to uplift and raise people who are not queer themselves, or are more so queer adjacent rather than actual queer representing. We tend to not credit our own people and give them the credit they deserve. By no means am I saying in this video Conan Gray is the most robbed queer artist. That's just factually incorrect. But I do believe he still deserves more credit than what he does get. And I suppose this video is dedicated to that and that alone. This video will work to discuss his current 3 bodies of work, 3 albums if you will, and their different stages in queerness, which I think are so quintessential to the queer existence and identity, and how Conan himself manages to sing and speak on something that cannot be monolith, yet he manages to speak on such universal experiences. I believe that Conan's music is dedicated to the reconciliation of queerness and growing up queer, and I think that most people, if not all queer people, can probably relate to something or another based in Conan's work, and that's up for you, I guess, the viewer, to decide as I go on this long tangent basically about how great Conan Gray is. One thing I would also like to mention before getting too deep into this video, anything that talks about gender speculation and or gender on a queer spectrum and a non-cisgendered spectrum is strictly my own thoughts and opinions and is not actually intertwined in Conan's music. It can be interpreted that way, but I want to make it very clear I cannot speak on Conan's gender and who he is or identifies as in that specific regard and spectrum, and I don't wish to put that on him. So those types of ideas and conversations will be strictly on my side of the table, not on Conan's lyricism. With that being said, let's discuss Conan's first album, Kid Crow. This album is the album I unfortunately have the least connection to due to being aged out of it by the time it released. But I still appreciate it for what it is, as I'm sure so many people love it for what it is. Kid Crow is an album that is fundamentally about being a queer kid who lives in isolation compared to those around them. It plays into the confusion and separation that is created from that lived experience and what it means to want to be honest, to have an open moment between the listener and Conan Gray, and that feeling that comes with being queer as a child. Most heteronormative raised and or living children are fine with the normal rom-coms and lifestyle choices that are bound to happen throughout one's life. But there's something fundamentally different about queer kids that break that norm. Having a life of normalcy is separate from heteronormative and gender binary people than it is for those who are not gender binary or queer adjacent identifying. The opening song in the album makes the mention of this idea of desperately wanting to be within that same group, to live in that same moment with those people around you, as to not feel as though you are the odd one out, yet still understanding you are the odd one out. In adulthood, you discover that that isn't a wrong thing or a bad thing, but you want so desperately in that moment to be normal. You want to feel the comfort of those around you, and you want the comfort crowd. That's right, this is about comfort crowd. You beg for those around you to feel the struggle in which you do. Without making others uncomfortable, you can't bring the discomfort you have to the table, not as you are, and rather what you could be. It is a unique and isolating feeling being a queer kid in a group of straight girls and boys. It's not that they make you uncomfortable, it's that they could never understand what it meant to be you. Not on a person-to-person level, but fundamentally, they will never understand you. You long for that group that will understand you, but you can't really express that because as teenagers are known for, they're all volatile and frankly going through their own shit. None of us were stable, but young queer kids, these notes especially, which is so specific to what Kid Crow feels it's dedicated to, young queerness. Kid Crow is infamously Conan Gray dreaming about a fictional love and interest, basing his music on what he's seen to be correct by the general populace, dreaming about what is expected. But for queer people, what is expected isn't the truth, and hence the album speaking of love and a romantic partner so intimately, yet not having any personal experience in that avenue. What Conan does have is his lived experience of those around him in media and those in media, in which he has always viewed these different perspectives from his. To dream that you could have the romance of those around you and of those in your life have access to dream that you can live to the degree that the movies told you they could. It's not that this is a queer, unique experience, but it is something that is tied to queerness due to our lack of representation. We don't get happy rom-coms about our soulmates, and we often don't even get to be the lead character. We often have a feeling closely connected to a song that is near and dear to my heart. We get a cut that always bleeds. For such a long time, I thought that my experience was separate, isolated even from queerness itself, and this concept of being dedicated to falling in love with someone who can never love you back. Through this album and many other things, I've discovered that's not that unique of an experience, and rather is a shared experience among many queer people. Some have direct correlation to queerness in this mindset, and some don't, and that's fine. Mine was the cut that always bled, the person who would have me at their beck and call, always saying we were just friends, but privately, there was more to it. It's an experience many queer people feel. For some, it's one-sided. For me, there was fault on both parties. Queer people who relate to this song, the cut that always bleeds. It is a truth of how much it hurts to see a person of the same sex attraction spend their romantic options with other. That boy that has a girlfriend or that girl that has a boyfriend, and yet you wait for them. Even when they aren't directly connected to someone of the opposite sex, and even when they are single, you still wait for them to realize that you're an option. But eventually you accept you were never an option, and you never could be. With that acceptance comes envy. With that acceptance comes Heather. A song I would assume most Conan Gray fans have a intimate knowledge of and or connection to, due to it being one of, if not Conan Gray's, most famous / infamous song. And one of the most infamous queer songs known to mankind. It's Heather. The song that embodies being a queer teen in almost all aspects. It is a song that is of envy and love of that which you are not. This is the part and the point where I explain the overlap of gender expression in Conan's music, who has stated to be a man, and yet there is such an undertone of not being who you are at birth, at least, in Heather. Such as a trans experience, and even though it's most likely only related to same-sex attraction, it's important to point out, since we're discussing the general concept of queerness in Conan Gray's music. As someone with diagnosed gender dysphoria and holy fuck, these gender norms have hands, I can confidently say the reading of Heather being a trans allegory makes sense to me, and I can put those dots together. Yet, it can also be read as a pretty natural, on-the-nose queer spectrum story. At its core, Heather is about being someone that you aren't. Not someone, but something that you aren't. Not just that, but something that you envy. The idea of Heather, a person that isn't real, rather, the idea of being who and what you want to be. A song about longing for something you could never be or have. Heather, although inspired by a real person, is not a real concept in which we could ever achieve. The song is more so about being a person in which you are attracted to's dream person. You want to be everything they want. You are obsessed and you want them to feel the same about you. And this can be read in such a multitude of ways. It's one of the reasons why the song has become such an international success and so popular among general audiences, because truly at its core is about someone longing for someone that they aren't, for better or for worse. It doesn't matter if it's for a person that you're attracted to or yourself. You understand you can never be the person of that individual's desire. You envy this Heather. For some, she's real, and for some, she's the perfect version of ourselves. You simply wish you could be Heather, and no matter what that Heather represents for you, even if you hate what she represents, you long for who she could be, who you could be, which is further built upon in our first song of Super Ache. Super Ache is an album dedicated to what being a queer adult means, yet not truly knowing. As someone who has imagined and flown close to the sun in both queer youth and teaching queer youth, there is a separation in which Super Ache thinks it understands, yet it doesn't, because what Super Ache understands is queer suffering, but not queer joy. And where its later albums do learn to understand, where Conan's later album learns to understand, sorry. The first song on the album, Super Ache, I'd like to discuss is People Watching, a song that among all else is about growing up queer, no matter who you are or what you are. This song is one of the motivating factors of me creating this entire video. You spend so much of your life people watching as a queer adult. It's something that naturally you come to terms with and learn with age. And in hindsight, understand that queerness is all about adapting to the world around you and who you need to be to survive. Not that it's right, and it's not that it is, that at the time, all that relationships are about is heteronormativity. A normal that needs to be achieved. A normal that even if you can't fit into or achieve is something that you want to. I think it's why I personally feel so connected to my hetero friends' relationships, and why I feel so much pride in them finding their other halves, or even happy endings. I have pride in those people because I wish I could achieve that, and what they have. I wish I could feel the same joy that connection they feel with another human being. Rather, I watch them and how much joy they have as they look into their partner's eyes. I watch as they plan their futures, and I dare to have one and dream of one, what my own future could be or can be. I am unsure, but if it has a shred of the ambition and love in which the people around me have for their partners, that sounds pretty good. Because all I have ever known is people watching. The simple idea that maybe someday, somehow, there is a person out there for me that can meet my needs, or maybe there never will be. It's not wrong, but it's also not right. And more importantly, it isn't taught. I hope that my future isn't full of people watching, but I can't tell you if that's based on my own wants, or if that's based on what the world wants for me. Rather, I hope that I can reach the happiness I've seen achieved from those around me. I hope that I can achieve the happiness in which I hold in my memories. As someone who is biased in this dissection of Conan's work, I want to say that much of what I'm going to say about memories can also be applied to Jigsaw. It was a hard toss between them both, but I chose memories to be an optimist and to truly embrace a healthier idea of who I and the viewer can be. So that's why. Sometimes we are objectively wronged, but if I have learned anything, objectivity is wrong, at least when it comes to human dynamics. I think Memories addresses that in a tragic and honest way. Yes, Memories are about addressing who has wronged you, but I also believe Memories to be about how you can't let that person go. How you wish to get over them, but you won't resist them if they come back into your life, no matter the implication, no matter the bad memories you have of them. You want that delusional, dramatic aspects of them back in your life. You wish that everything would play out in this romantic way in which you remember them, and when you tell your friends about them, hindsight, you realize it's not all the rose-colored glasses you thought it was. You wish the life you had with this person would remain in your dreams rather than the reality that they weren't for you. A feeling that, although is gender neutral, most of queer people's first love have an element of tragedy and unforgiving nature in which, as I can speak from my own personal experience, affects us for way longer than we realize it and want it to. Which is what Memories is all about. That love we feel when we're younger and have ideals for the world and what it means for who we could be if we weren't held back by who we were. If we weren't the side character in our own stories. These memories create a person who isn't us, a person who sits still in a perfect version of ourselves, but never moves forward. No matter how old we get, I am still standing at the exit. A song dedicated to those around them and what it feels like to feel left behind, yet not exactly a feeling of isolation, is so isolating. This song feels like a song for those queer kids who watch their straight friends go off and have their happy endings or attain those dreams of not for themselves, but for a person they hoped they could be. You thought you found someone who understood you, yet as adulthood came around and hit you, you discovered that that just wasn't the case. You determined that this idea that you built up of what could be or could have been was never for you and that person. This isn't limited to queerness, but it can definitely be applied to queer acceptance, and the idea that you sit at the exit waiting for others to join in you waiting and understand who you are and were, but they won't. This is yet again where I think Conan's music transcends just the concept of who he is and what he is explicitly talking about, and rather can take on a form of its own, discussing the idea of someone who knows you so well can never really know you if you don't let them in. This isn't to say you should always let them in either. Lord knows I have let in and not let in people in ways in which should be vice versa. The exit is meant to be a double entendre of what it means to be queer and the separate meanings of that identity. The identity that the perfect idea of queerness exists. How could someone that isn't you achieve that? Something that I never could. At least I tell myself to make myself feel better, because in truth, I am still standing at the exit. I greet you as you pass me. It's not a matter of am I right and you're wrong. Rather, it's the fact that we are on two roads that have gone separate ways. And you chose to take the exit. You got the escape code, and yet here I am still suffering here in queerness and the identity that I am, as I envy you for the person you have become and can be. That the person that you are. But Conan takes a drastically different approach to many of these thought processes in his most recent album, and the final album of this video, Found Heaven. Found Heaven's approach in sound compared to Conan's previous work is unique, to say the least. Inspired by a 70s to 80s nostalgia in which we see in so many pieces of media nowadays and have also taken inspiration from, it aims to have that club and party sound that we often associate with those times. Obviously drastically different in audio, but I believe in lyricism and content of the album, it is still dedicated to a queer coming up story or growing up as a queer person content and discography, with even similar narratives to our previous albums and songs, where Super Ache and Kid Crow lament over these memories and times that hurt us so much. Found Heaven aims to reminisce over them, and just as the album sounds make you feel nostalgic. Found Heaven aims to play these memories out over and over and over again until they cannot hurt you anymore. They will create a never-ending song. A song that is technically not positive and rather is all about reliving a moment in your life where you feel remorse and regret over, talking the viewer through the time in which you dedicated all of yourself to another person and how in that moment it felt so right. No, it felt good to do. Yet, in hindsight, you realize all of it was rose-colored glasses over your eyes. You know you weren't right for one another, and that relationship wasn't good for the long run, but you remember that feeling of the tinted lenses. It was bliss in ignorance, and so you replay the bliss, celebrating the happiness you found in that relationship or situation you lament over to this day. Never-Ending Song is dedicated to flipping the narrative of bad memories and being an honest option with yourself about these memories. It feels like you wasted all of your time. That was all for nothing in reality, but the fact that you still think about it proves that it wasn't for nothing. You play these memories over and over again, hoping that to only feel the good parts. The bad will always be there. the feeling of the bad and the good, and celebrating all of those parts together and not focusing on just the bad is the point of the song, though. Allowing yourself to still connect to that part of you who felt joy during such a terrible time in which you still to this day lament over. Time that was further built upon in the song Alley Rose. Alley Rose is yet another song that probably shouldn't be celebrated or given positive, but it is a song about something that so many queer people can relate to. The object of our affection not accepting what or who we are, refusing to go the next step, but also refusing to let go. Never embracing, but always holding on. Conan mentions the feelings of being driven insane and how much this person has rooted such unhealthy tendencies, and how Conan would lower his own worth to achieve Alley Rose's happiness. Yet again, memories many queer people can connect to and personally feel. I long for what I could have been, and yet you enjoy what we are without accepting the truth of our relationship. In Found Heaven fashion, this song musically remains a more upbeat sound, further emphasizing the joy in these bad moments. It's written to romanticize these terrible actions, as to point out to the viewer themselves how silly you were. And how silly you are to lower yourself for someone else. Conan expresses what it means to rewrite yourself for someone else's narrative. You long to reach out to that younger version of yourself and tell them that they are worth so much more, but you can't come to that conclusion without Alley Rose. Fortunate but true, someone has to go to their lowest in order to get to their highest, and not just that often do queer people need to do that and put their own value onto someone else because of our lack of representation. Queer people often have to assign their self-worth to someone else, and Alley Rose, if you will, that person will always break your heart, and it's up to you to learn to pick up those pieces and put your heart back together. Longing for that person to just hold on to your heart and never let it go, it's never an option, and that's what's killing you the whole time. This album has a theme of discussing things that are negative in a positive way, so I'm just gonna put that there now since we're on the third and final song. Killing Me is a one-sided dialogue where Conan expresses all of the thoughts that he had over a person, knowing that everything they did for that person wasn't deserved. They take space in his mind, and though we barely talk, they take everything we know and love about ourselves and spin them to hate and make us hate ourselves in the process. Killing Me is not truly about a person, it's about Conan and the listener. We assign the blame onto the person who we held so high in our minds, but in reality, we were doing it to ourselves the whole time. This song celebrates being able to let that part of you die, to not go down with that person who was killing you the whole time. You want them so bad, yet you are so proud of yourself for making it out alive, finally making the decision to remove yourself and fight for yourself, not for someone else. Yet again, something tied so clearly to queer youth and to how hindsight, you probably were wrong, but Found Heaven dedicates itself to acknowledging that there was good that came out of these wrongs. And with that, we have a choppy as hell Enigma Bazaar media channel video. I don't know why I was so off my game today, but I really was. Too often, I stand by this, we raise up people as queer icons or queer legends or giving queer status to non-queer people, and this is, I guess, my small part in trying to really make sure that we're giving queer people their queer flowers, because queer art is good art. I'm certain I'm not the only one who has had many of these thoughts, although scrambled, about Conan Gray, and so here's hoping you enjoyed it. Be sure to like and subscribe, and goodbye! I chose this very purposefully. I was a Panic at the Disco baby gay, so I am assuming that there's overlap there. Don't check me on those specs, on those stats, but there's gotta be overlap there. You like Panic at the Disco, you probably grew up to like Panic Gray. You probably learned to like Panic Gray. I can't say that I know that for sure. But you got a band to your closet, don't you?
I know there's gonna be
each their own to each their own. I have to hold this like really close. I gotta be making out with you from the video properly. So be prepared for that. Another video.